Shalom and welcome to Challenging Torah, a project of the Malibu Jewish Center and Synagogue. As we enter a new book, Leviticus, in our first portion, Vayikra, we have this time an absolutely perfect conjunction of our Musar studies, mindfulness practice, and the Torah portion of the week, which we've been trying to do throughout this series this year. Vayikra, and the Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, when you speak to the Israelite people, Vayikra, all three of these things come together, as we've studied under the aegis of the Institute for Jewish Spirituality and its teachers. All three, Musar, mindfulness, and Torah, come together in an amazingly beautiful teaching this Shabbat. Vayikra, and the Lord called to Moses. Moses, who in the terms of Musar that we have been studying, the word is anivut, and an anav is one who understands his proper size. He's not too big, he's not too little, and it changes, of course, with each situation. In the words of Musar teachings, it is the middle space between self-deprecation and arrogance. For Moses, this is his task throughout his lifetime. And unfortunately, it brings him all the praise as the most humble man on earth, and also is his greatest trial that perhaps prevents him from actually entering the promised land. In Numbers, when he is defended by God later on because Aaron and Miriam are really gossiping about him and his wife, and God says, how can you attack my servant Moses, who is the most humble man on earth? Enough. But there's a place that is too much anivut. Moses stands first, years before, at the burning bush, and as God calls to him from the bush, Moses at first replies, as you should when God calls, Hineni, I'm here. And Moses says, I want you to take the people out of the land of Israel, etc. And he, no way, man, I barely speak. And God reasons with him and is patient. And finally God gives up and says, fine, I'll send Aaron. But Moses will not get to be the high priest. It cost him. And so he's endlessly finding that balance, right? And again, Moses goes on to the other side, the side of arrogance, when later on in the book of Numbers he hits rather than speaks to the rock. Speaking would have shown God's power. Hitting kind of shows Moses' power. A little bit of ego in the way, and it is said that for this reason he doesn't get to enter the promised land, but only sees from the outside. We are always struggling with our midot, our process of working on ourselves, even Moses. So at this moment, we are looking at Moses, who's sitting what I call in the pup tent, the Ohel Moed, the little tent outside of the big tent of meeting, right? We've ended the book of Exodus with the words, and Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled upon it, and the presence of the Lord was filling the tabernacle. So there he is, sitting outside. I don't know, is he waiting to be called? Or does he think his job is done? I mean, maybe he's finished. He managed to make the tabernacle stand. He literally pulled it together. He brought down the second tablets. He's put those tablets in the ark as instructed. His face is radiant. He's seen at least the back of God and God's qualities. Maybe he's done. But no, this is only the middle of the journey. And so God is going to call to him and say, this is what you need to say to the Israelite people as they learn to worship me. And it will be another 38 years of instructions in the desert. It's hard to know when we're done. Retirement is not an easy thing to find. And this moment of God calling Vayikra, here's the key. When you look at the word, and he called, at the end of the word is a very tiny aleph. All the letters are big, but it's written in every Torah, anywhere, with a teeny tiny aleph. And you say, what, is this a mistake? No. This is the inside, inner, still small voice aleph that begins the entire book of Vayikra. And so we can't hear God unless we go into that inside still voice. This is the practice of mindfulness. As our teacher, Rabbi Sheila Weinberg, says, it's about discrimination. It's about being able to hear between the real self and the false self. When do I hear God's voice? And when do I hear the insidious voice of my own ego? And learning to discriminate between those two is mindfulness. And mindfulness requires that we sit and be quiet and listen. We go into our inner cave. We take that meditation time and we listen to the still small voice. And we ask, what am I being called to do? Levi Yitzchak Berdichev and the Kedushat Levi, who are Hasidic texts, talk about being called as what are the mitzvot that we do in our life. We don't usually say being a rabbi is my calling, but there is a place where I feel called to perform certain mitzvot. How do I know that's not my ego? How do I know it's what's needed in the world? I have to be very careful to listen to the small aleph. And so the rest of this book is going to be filled with sacrifices. And next week we're going to talk about the whole sacrificial system and how it works. But really in our time, what's the sacrifice? I need to put my ego on the altar. I need to release that ego and say, putting you out there on the grill, is this really God's voice? I need to sit and breathe and listen. What better time to do this than on Shabbat? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Have a wonderful Shabbat of quiet breath and listening to the small aleph inside.